leaving everything behind. Have you ever stood in the middle of your room, surrounded by boxes, and suddenly wondered when your life became something you could pack into cardboard? Not because you wanted adventure, not because you were brave, but because staying felt heavier than leaving. If you are tired of starting again, tired of learning English and feeling stuck at the same level, this story is already about you, even if you don't know it yet. 2 weeks ago, I left almost everything behind and landed in the United States. I didn't land with confidence. I landed with jet lag, dry eyes, and a head full of unfinished sentences in English. You know that feeling when your brain knows the words, but your mouth refuses to cooperate? That was me. Standing in an American airport, listening to announcements that sounded familiar but still too fast, I realized something uncomfortable. Starting over is not loud. It is very quiet. It feels like sitting alone, watching everyone else move with purpose while you are still figuring out where to stand. When people hear the phrase "move to America," they imagine big dreams. They imagine energy, opportunity, and freedom. But nobody tells you about the first night. The first night is just you, a strange ceiling, and the sound of air conditioning humming like it's asking questions you can't answer yet. The climate was different. The air felt drier, colder than I expected for that season. My body noticed before my mind did. In psychology, there is a simple idea. When your environment changes suddenly, your nervous system goes into alert mode. Your brain is not trying to scare you. It is trying to protect you. That's why, on that first night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was excited. Because my brain kept whispering, "You are not home." And that word, home, suddenly became very confusing. Is home a country? A person? A language you can use without thinking? When you learn English as a second language, you don't just learn words. You learn who you are allowed to be in that language. In my old life, I was fluent in myself. Here, I had to slow down. I had to choose simple sentences. Thank you. Sorry. These are easy words, but using them all day makes you feel small. Linguists call this language ego. When your language level drops, your confidence often drops with it. You feel less intelligent, even though you are not. You just don't have the tools yet. That realization hit me hard during a simple moment. Buying coffee. The barista smiled and asked a question I didn't catch. My brain froze. You know that freeze? That half-second where you panic, replay sounds, and guess. I guessed wrong. The coffee came out different. Not bad. Just wrong. And strangely, that small mistake made my chest tight. Because it reminded me that here, everything costs more energy. Every sentence. Every interaction. Even silence feels louder in a new country. This is where many people quit. Not moving countries, but learning English. Because English becomes connected to discomfort. Your brain starts to avoid it. Neuroscience explains this clearly. The brain likes efficiency. If English feels slow and painful, your brain will push you back to your comfort language. It is not laziness. It is biology. The mistake people make is trying to force motivation. Motivation doesn't work when your nervous system feels unsafe. Safety comes first. That's why, during those first days, I made a quiet decision. I would stop trying to sound smart. I would speak slowly. I would accept pauses. I would let my English be simple and real, like my situation. Instead of memorizing difficult words, I listened to everyday conversations. Weather, moving, rent, family. Americans talk a lot about moving, I noticed. We just moved. We're thinking of moving. It's casual, almost light. But behind it is a deep cultural truth. Movement is normal here. Restarting is not failure. It's a skill. And that idea slowly softened something in me. If Americans can move cities, states, even lives, maybe starting again is not something to be ashamed of. Maybe it's something to learn. In learning theory, there is a concept called beginner's mind. When you accept that you are new, your brain becomes more open. You make fewer emotional judgments. You learn faster. Children do this naturally. Adults resist it because of pride. I had to let that go. At night, I practiced English differently. Not by studying hard, but by replaying the day in simple sentences. Today was cold. I felt nervous. I bought coffee. This kind of slow, personal storytelling does something powerful. It connects language to emotion and memory. Research shows that when learning is emotionally relevant, retention increases. In simple terms, Your brain remembers stories better than rules. Especially stories about yourself. Leaving everything behind didn't suddenly make me strong. It made me honest. Honest about fear. Honest about how tiring it is to rebuild identity in another language. But honesty is lighter than pretending. And that is where real progress starts. Not with confidence, but with acceptance. So if you are listening to this and feeling stuck, exhausted, or embarrassed by your English, let me say this clearly. You are not broken. You are just in the middle of a restart. And restarts are messy, quiet, and slow. But they are also alive. Basically, your brain isn't failing you. It's asking you to slow down and begin again, properly this time. First weeks in America. The first weeks in a new country don't arrive like a movie scene. They arrive quietly, almost shyly, then sit on your chest when you least expect it. 2 weeks into living in the United States, I realized something strange. Nothing dramatic had happened, yet I felt exhausted all the time. Not physical exhaustion. Mental exhaustion. The kind that comes from translating the world non-stop. If you are practicing English listening, reading, and speaking and feel tired without knowing why, this part of the story is for you. The climate was the first surprise. People talk about weather casually, but climate shapes behavior in ways we rarely notice. In my first week, mornings were cold and dry, afternoons warmer, evenings unpredictable. My skin felt different. My throat felt dry. I drank more water than usual and still felt thirsty. Your body reacts faster than your thoughts. Science explains this well. When climate changes suddenly, your body spends extra energy regulating itself. That alone can increase fatigue and anxiety. So if you move to a new place and feel off, it may not be emotional weakness. It may be biology. Now add language on top of that. Every sound felt louder. Cars. Doors. Voices. American English has rhythm and confidence. Even simple conversations move fast. In stores, people expect quick responses. How are you? Is not a question, it is a greeting. During my first days, I answered it honestly. Too honestly. I said, I am tired. The cashier smiled, slightly confused, then moved on. That was my first lesson in American culture. Not every question wants an answer. Some just want flow. This is important for real English listening practice. Understanding culture helps you understand language. Many learners think their problem is vocabulary. Often, the real problem is expectation. In the US, communication values speed and ease. Silence feels heavy. Pauses feel awkward. If you come from a culture where silence is respectful, this can feel stressful. Your brain starts racing, trying to fill gaps, even when you don't have the words. Psychology calls this cognitive overload. Your brain is processing sounds, meanings, social rules and self-image at the same time. No wonder you feel tired. Studies show that second language users use more brain resources for the same task than native speakers. That means you are not slower. You are working harder. During my first weeks, I noticed something else. Americans are friendly, but not intrusive. People smile, chat briefly, then move on. There is warmth without depth at first. This can feel lonely if you expect instant connection. In my old life, conversations took time but went deep. Here, everything felt light. Weather talk, moving talk, work talk. At first, I judged it. Then I realized something. These light conversations are practice. They are social warm-ups. So I used them for slow English speaking practice. Instead of pushing myself into complex discussions, I stayed with simple topics. Weather, location, daily routines. It's colder than I expected. I just moved here. I'm still learning English. These sentences worked. They opened doors without pressure. Research in language learning confirms this. Repeated, low-stress conversations build fluency more effectively than rare high-pressure ones. One afternoon, while walking through a quiet neighborhood, I noticed moving trucks. Again. Another family leaving. Another family arriving. It felt constant. This movement shapes American mindset. People here are used to change. They plan for it. Homes are temporary. Jobs are flexible. Even relationships adapt. This explains why Americans often ask, "How long are you staying?" Not because they want you to leave, but because permanence is not assumed. This cultural difference affected my emotions more than I expected. When nothing feels permanent, your brain struggles to relax. Neuroscience tells us that predictability creates safety. When everything feels temporary, your nervous system stays alert. That explains why, during those first weeks, I felt restless at night. Not scared, just unsettled. So I adjusted my learning approach. Instead of chasing fluency, I chased familiarity. I listened to the same types of conversations every day. I read simple signs, menus, messages. I repeated phrases I heard often. This is called input repetition. Studies show that the brain learns faster when patterns repeat in context. Not through memorization, but through exposure. At night, I spoke English out loud to myself. Slowly, calmly. I described the day. Today felt long. The weather changed again. I understood more English than yesterday. This method supports English listening and speaking for beginners and intermediate learners, especially when motivation is low. You are not performing. You are processing. Emotionally, these first weeks taught me patience. Starting again is not heroic. It is humbling. But humility lowers resistance. When you stop fighting discomfort, your brain relaxes. Learning accelerates. If you are in your first weeks of learning English seriously, or your first weeks in a new environment, remember this. Feeling tired does not mean you are failing. It means your brain is adapting. Climate, culture, and language are all asking you to change at once. That is not easy. But it is temporary. Basically, those first weeks are not about progress you can see. They are about building invisible foundations. And without them, nothing else stands. Why Americans move often. If you ask Americans where they are from, many of them pause before answering. Not because they are confused, but because the answer has layers. Born in one state. College in another. Job somewhere else. Family now somewhere new. During my third week in the United States, I finally understood that moving is not an interruption here. It is a rhythm. And if you are learning English through real stories, this rhythm explains more than any textbook ever could. At first, constant movement felt unsettling to me. I grew up believing that stability equals safety. Same house. Same neighborhood. Same people. But in America, stability is often internal, not geographical. People move to chase whether work, schools, love, or simply space. This changes how they think, how they speak, and how they relate to others. Understanding this helped my real English listening practice more than memorizing idioms ever did. One day, I asked someone why they moved so many times. The answer was simple. It made sense at the time. That sentence stayed with me. Americans often make decisions based on current logic, not long-term tradition. In psychology, this is called pragmatic decision-making. Instead of asking, "Where do I belong forever?" the question becomes, "What works right now?" This mindset reduces emotional attachment to place. And that emotional flexibility shows up in language. Conversations are lighter. Goodbyes are quicker. Introductions are frequent. For an English learner, this environment can feel cold at first. You might think people don't care. But that's not true. Caring just looks different. Connection here is built through repeated contact, not shared history. You don't need to know someone for 10 years. You need to show up consistently. This is important for slow English speaking practice because it lowers pressure. You don't have to be perfect today. You just have to be present again tomorrow. I noticed that many everyday conversations revolve around movement. We just moved. We're thinking of relocating. Traffic is worse since we moved. These sentences repeat everywhere, from grocery stores to school meetings, from casual chats to serious plans. Repetition matters. Language learning research shows that high-frequency phrases learned in context stick faster. When you hear the same structure again and again, your brain stops translating. It starts recognizing patterns. This is when English became easier for me. Not fluent. Easier. Because the language matched life. Instead of forcing advanced vocabulary, I listened for repeated ideas. Change. Weather. Cost of living. Commute. Family. These topics appear everywhere in American life because they are tied to mobility. When people move often, they must quickly explain themselves. That's why American English favors clarity over elegance. Climate plays a quiet role here too. People move to escape cold winters, extreme heat, or natural disasters. Climate influences mood, energy, and social habits. In warmer states, conversations felt slower, more relaxed. In colder areas, people spoke faster, more directly. This may sound small, but studies in environmental psychology show that temperature affects communication style. Your brain adapts its pace to surroundings. So when you feel your English speed change depending on place, that's not failure. That's adaptation. Emotionally, understanding American mobility changed how I judged myself. I stopped thinking, "Why can't I feel settled yet?" and started thinking, maybe settling takes time here. In a culture where movement is normal, roots grow differently. They grow inside routines, not locations. Morning coffee, weekly schedules, familiar voices. This insight helped my English listening and reading practice because I stopped expecting emotional depth immediately. I listened for consistency instead. There is also a hidden psychological benefit to movement. When people believe they can leave, they feel less trapped. This sense of option reduces stress. Research shows that perceived control improves mental health, even if you never use that control. In America, movement equals option. That belief shapes confidence, and confidence shapes speech. You hear it in how people talk about change without fear. For someone learning English, this can be inspiring or intimidating. Inspiring because reinvention is allowed. Intimidating because nothing waits for you. But here is the key lesson I learned. You don't have to move fast to live in a fast-moving culture. You just have to move forward. Slowly is fine. Quietly is fine. So I adjusted again. I practiced English through the theme of movement. I described places. I talked about weather changes. I shared small transitions in my day. I walked to a new street. I met someone new. I am still adjusting. These sentences are simple, but they mirror American life. That alignment reduced friction. My brain stopped resisting English because English started explaining my reality. If you are watching this and wondering why Americans seem comfortable starting over, the answer is not courage. It is familiarity. They have practiced it. And practice removes fear. The same rule applies to language. You don't need talent. You need repetition without judgment. Basically, Americans move so much because they believe they can. And when you start believing you can begin again too, English stops being an enemy and starts becoming a tool. Climate shapes daily life. Climate doesn't knock on the door and introduce itself. It slips into your skin, your mood, your energy, and quietly starts making decisions for you. During my second week in the United States, I stopped checking the weather out of curiosity and started checking it out of necessity. Not because I planned anything special, but because everything depended on it. How I dressed, how I slept, how patient my English felt in my mouth that day. If you are practicing English listening, reading, and speaking through real life, climate is a teacher you can't ignore. Back home, seasons followed rules I understood. Here, climate felt unpredictable. One morning was cold and dry, the kind that tightens your face. By afternoon, the sun felt sharp, almost aggressive. My body struggled to catch up. Scientists explain this through circadian rhythm disruption. When temperature and light patterns change suddenly, your internal clock gets confused. Sleep quality drops. Focus weakens. Emotional sensitivity increases. So if you feel more anxious or impatient when learning English in a new climate, that reaction is physical before it is psychological. I noticed how Americans talk about weather constantly. Not in a dramatic way. Casually. It's getting colder. It's too dry today. I miss the sun. Weather here is not background noise. It is a daily variable. And because people move often, climate becomes part of identity. Someone is a cold weather person. Someone else can't handle heat. These phrases appear everywhere in conversation. That repetition matters for real English listening practice. When language reflects daily discomfort, it sticks. What surprised me most was how climate influenced behavior. On cold days, people moved faster. Conversations were shorter. Voices sounded more direct. On warmer days, people lingered, smiled longer, talked about plans. Environmental psychology supports this. Temperature affects social openness. Warmth increases tolerance. Cold increases efficiency. When you learn English in different climates, your emotional experience of the language changes too. There were days when my English felt heavy. Not because I forgot words, but because my body was tired. Dry air made my throat sore. I spoke less, listened more. And that taught me something important. Language learning is physical. Your mouth, breath, and energy matter. Many learners blame themselves for bad English days, without realizing their body is under stress. Hydration, sleep, and comfort directly affect pronunciation and listening accuracy. So I adjusted again. I slowed everything down. I practiced slow English speaking when my energy was low. Short sentences. Clear pauses. No pressure. Today feels cold. My body feels tired. I need to rest. These sentences were honest. Honesty reduces cognitive load. Studies show that when learners speak about immediate physical sensations, fluency improves because the brain doesn't need to imagine or translate abstract ideas. Climate also changed how I understood American housing and movement. People choose where to live based on weather more than I expected. Sunlight matters. Winter length matters. Natural disasters matter. This explains why moving is normal. When climate affects mental health, relocation becomes self-care, not instability. This perspective softened my judgment. I stopped seeing movement as escape and started seeing it as adjustment. Emotionally, climate triggered memories. Cold reminded me of loneliness. Heat reminded me of home. These emotional associations surfaced unexpectedly while listening to English conversations. But instead of avoiding them, I used them. Emotional memory strengthens learning. Neuroscience shows that emotionally charged experiences activate the amygdala, increasing memory retention. When you link English to feeling, not just meaning, it stays longer. At night, I reflected on the day in English, focusing on climate. The air was dry today. The sun felt strong. I felt quiet because of the cold. This kind of self-narration supports English listening and reading practice because it builds internal language. You are not repeating sentences from a book. You are describing your life. That relevance creates motivation without forcing it. I also noticed how weather affects family life here. Parents plan around seasons. Children's routines change with daylight. Holidays feel different depending on temperature. Climate shapes traditions. This understanding added depth to simple English phrases. We stay inside. We go out more. Winter is hard. These sentences carry cultural meaning. When you understand the climate, you understand the emotion behind the language. If you are learning English and feel inconsistent, ask yourself this. Is your environment stable? Is your body comfortable? Language does not exist in isolation. It sits inside a living system. When that system is stressed, learning slows. That is not failure. That is feedback. Basically, climate doesn't just change where Americans live. It changes how they talk, move, and connect. And when you stop fighting those changes and start listening to them, English becomes less of a struggle and more of a reflection of real life. Culture in small moments. Culture doesn't announce itself with flags or speeches. It hides in tiny moments, the kind you almost miss if you blink. During my first weeks in America, culture showed up not in museums or holidays, but in grocery lines, front porches, and the way people said sorry when nothing was wrong. If you are doing English listening, reading, and speaking practice through real stories, these small moments matter more than big explanations. One morning, I held the door open for someone. They smiled and said, "Thank you." Then they added, "I appreciate it." That extra sentence surprised me. In my culture, thank you is enough. Here, appreciation is often spoken out loud. Not dramatically, just casually. This is a small cultural habit, but it shapes language. American English uses emotional words more frequently than many learners expect. I appreciate it. That means a lot. I love that. These phrases appear everywhere, even in neutral situations. At first, my brain flagged them as exaggeration. But over time, I realized something important. In American culture, expressing emotion verbally is a way to maintain social smoothness. It's not always deep. It's functional. Psychology calls this affective signaling. People use emotional language to keep interactions positive and predictable. Understanding this helped my real English listening practice because I stopped overanalyzing tone. I listened for function instead. Another small moment happened in a neighborhood I walked through daily. People waved. Not to start conversations. Just a brief acknowledgement. That wave carries meaning. It says, "I see you." No obligation follows. This balance between friendliness and privacy is very American. For someone new, it can feel confusing. Are we friends? Are we strangers? The answer is both. This affects how English is spoken. Conversations often start warm and end quickly. You might share a smile, a comment about weather, then move on. For learners, this is perfect practice. Low commitment, high repetition. Language learning research shows that frequent, low-stakes interactions build fluency faster than intense conversations. You are training rhythm, not depth. Inside stores, I noticed another pattern. People apologize often. Sorry. Excuse me. Even when they didn't cause a problem. This is not guilt. It's social lubrication. These words reduce friction. They keep space flowing. When you understand this, slow English speaking practice becomes easier. You stop worrying about saying the wrong thing. You just keep things moving. But culture also appeared in moments of distance. Americans value personal space. Not emotionally, but physically. Standing too close feels uncomfortable. Touch is limited. Hugs are selective. This changes how people communicate. Words replace gestures. Verbal clarity matters more. This explains why American English often sounds direct. I'll let you know. That doesn't work for me. These sentences are not rude. They are respectful boundaries. For English learners, this directness can feel cold. But it is actually kind. It removes guessing. Studies in intercultural communication show that clarity reduces anxiety. Once I understood this, I stopped taking short answers personally. My listening improved because my emotions interfered less. Culture also shaped daily routines. Eating early, planning ahead, scheduling everything. Let's grab coffee sometime does not mean now. It means later, with a calendar. This taught me an important language lesson. Meaning is not always literal. Context matters. Pragmatics, the study of how meaning changes with situation, is a key part of English listening comprehension. I practiced by observing patterns instead of translating words. When someone said, "We should do this again," I listened to tone, not promise. When someone said, "Let me check my schedule," I heard uncertainty, not delay. This reduced confusion and disappointment. My English became calmer because my expectations adjusted. At home, culture showed up differently. Quiet evenings. Individual activities. Each person in their own space. This independence shapes family language. I need some time. Do your thing. These phrases appear often. They don't signal distance. They signal respect. Understanding this helped me understand American family conversations better, especially when learning English through stories about love and marriage. There is science behind this too. Cultures that value individualism encourage verbal expression of needs. Saying what you want is seen as healthy. Suppressing needs creates tension. When you learn English, you are also learning to voice yourself differently. That takes time and patience. At night, I reflected on cultural moments in simple English. People are friendly but private. Words are important here. Small talk is practice. This kind of reflection supports English reading and speaking practice because it connects language to observation. You are not memorizing culture. You are noticing it. If you feel confused by American culture, especially when learning English, remember this. Confusion means you are paying attention. Culture lives in the details. And once you see those details, language becomes less mysterious. Basically, you don't need to understand America all at once. You just need to notice the small moments. That's where real English lives. English in real life. There is a moment when you realize textbooks prepared you for exams, not for life. For me, that moment came when I needed English not to impress anyone, but simply to exist. During my first weeks in America, English stopped being a subject and became a survival tool. If you are practicing English listening, reading, and speaking and feel like classroom English disappears in real conversations, this section is exactly where that gap begins to close. Real-life English is slower than movies and messier than lessons. People interrupt themselves. They change direction mid-sentence. They use simple words to express complex feelings. At first, this confused me. I understood vocabulary, but missed meaning. Then I noticed something important. Real English is repetitive. People reuse the same phrases again and again because efficiency matters. Once I started listening for repetition instead of perfection, my real English listening practice improved immediately. Take this simple phrase, "I'm still figuring it out." I heard it everywhere. In work conversations. In casual chats. In serious talks about life. It means uncertainty, humility, and honesty at the same time. You don't learn this phrase from grammar books. You learn it by hearing it attached to real emotion. Neuroscience explains why this works. When language is linked to emotion and context, the brain stores it as a pattern, not a rule. Patterns are easier to recall under stress. In real life, English also respects energy. People speak differently when tired, stressed, or relaxed. I noticed my own English changed with my mood. On good days, words flowed. On bad days, sentences shortened. Instead of fighting that, I accepted it. Acceptance lowered anxiety. Studies show that anxiety directly reduces working memory, which is essential for language processing. When you relax, your brain literally has more space for words. One powerful change I made was practicing slow English speaking on purpose. I paused. I breathed. I didn't rush to fill silence. In American culture, silence can feel uncomfortable, but it is allowed. When you speak slowly and clearly, people listen more attentively. They adjust. This surprised me. I expected impatience. I received patience. Real communication adapts when you let it. I also learned that real English values clarity over complexity. Saying, "I don't understand" is respected. Saying, "Can you say that again, more slowly?" is normal. These sentences are not signs of weakness. They are tools. Research in communication psychology shows that requesting clarification improves mutual understanding and reduces social tension. When I started using these phrases confidently, conversations became easier, not harder. Reading English in real life helped too. Signs, emails, instructions, short messages, not long articles. These small texts trained my brain to recognize common structures. Please note. Let us know. We recommend. High-frequency phrases appeared everywhere. Exposure matters. Language acquisition studies confirm that repeated exposure to functional language accelerates comprehension more than isolated study sessions. Listening was the hardest part at first. Not because people spoke too fast, but because they didn't speak clearly. Words blended. Sounds softened. This is called connected speech. Native speakers rarely pronounce words separately. Once I understood this, I stopped blaming myself. I trained my ear by listening to everyday conversations, not scripted audio. This is essential for English listening practice for real situations. At home, I replayed conversations in my head. Slowly, I repeated key phrases out loud. Not perfectly, just clearly. This method is supported by cognitive science. Mental rehearsal strengthens neural pathways. You don't need hours. You need consistency. 5 minutes daily creates momentum. Emotionally, real-life English forced honesty. I couldn't hide behind advanced vocabulary. I had to express fear, confusion, and hope with simple words. And something unexpected happened. People responded more warmly. Simpler language felt more human. Communication became connection, not performance. This affected my confidence deeply. Confidence didn't come from speaking better English. It came from being understood. Once I felt understood, mistakes stopped feeling dangerous. They became feedback. Learning accelerated. If you are learning English and feel stuck, ask yourself this. Are you practicing English that belongs to your life, or English that belongs to a test? Real life requires different skills. Listening for meaning, not words. Speaking for connection, not accuracy. Reading for function, not beauty. Basically, real English is not about sounding smart. It is about being clear, calm, and present. And when you learn English this way, progress stops being painful and starts becoming natural. Love across changes. Love doesn't ask if you are ready before it adds weight to your life. It arrives quietly, then waits to see if you can carry it through change. During my weeks in America, love became the hardest part to translate into English, not because the words were complex, but because the emotions were moving faster than my language. If you are practicing English listening, reading, and speaking through real stories, love is where language stops being academic and starts being human. Moving to a new country changes how you love. Distance, stress, and uncertainty press on relationships in ways you don't expect. In my case, love had to survive jet lag, climate shock, and a version of me that sounded less confident than before. When your English becomes simpler, your emotional expression becomes simpler too. That can feel scary. You worry your partner might misunderstand silence as distance, or short sentences as coldness. There is psychology behind this fear. When people experience major life changes, their attachment system activates. You seek reassurance. But when language is limited, reassurance feels harder to give. This is why many couples struggle during relocation. Research in relationship psychology shows that external stressors, like moving or cultural adjustment, reduce emotional bandwidth. It's not that love weakens. Communication does. I noticed this in small moments. Choosing food. Planning the day. Talking about feelings late at night. In my native language, I could soften sentences, add humor, show nuance. In English, everything felt direct. I'm tired. I don't know. I need time. These sentences are honest, but they sound heavy. American English favors clarity. Emotional cushioning comes later, with tone and context. Understanding this helped me stop blaming myself for sounding different. Love in America also looks different culturally. People talk openly about emotions, but protect personal independence. I love you can coexist with I need space. For someone new, this feels contradictory, but it's not. In individualistic cultures, love is expected to support autonomy, not replace it. This understanding improved my real English listening practice in emotional conversations. I stopped listening for reassurance in every sentence and started listening for respect. There were days when stress made us quieter. Silence filled the room. In the past, silence meant conflict. Here, I learned silence can mean processing. Neuroscience shows that under stress, the brain needs downtime to regulate emotion. Talking too much can overload it. So silence became part of communication. This realization changed how I practiced slow English speaking. I spoke less, but more meaningfully. We also used repetition. Simple phrases repeated often. We'll figure it out. One step at a time. We're okay. These phrases may sound ordinary, but repetition builds emotional safety. Studies show that predictable language patterns reduce anxiety. When your environment is unstable, repeated words become anchors. They help both language learning and emotional regulation. Love also taught me to listen differently. Not for perfect grammar, but for emotional signals. Tone, pace, pauses. These elements carry meaning beyond words. This is crucial for English listening comprehension in real relationships. When you focus only on words, you miss intention. When you listen to emotion, understanding deepens. Cultural differences appeared here too. In America, expressing needs directly is encouraged. I need support. I need rest. These sentences felt selfish to me at first. But research in cross-cultural psychology explains this. In individualistic cultures, direct expression prevents resentment. Once I accepted this, my English improved because I stopped hiding behind vague language. At night, I reflected on love in simple English. Love feels harder here. Change makes love honest. We are learning together. This kind of reflection supports English reading and speaking practice because it connects language to vulnerability. Vulnerability deepens memory. Words learned through emotion stay longer. One powerful moment happened during a misunderstanding. I didn't have the words to explain how overwhelmed I felt. I paused. I breathed. Then I said slowly, "I'm not angry. I'm scared." The sentence was simple. The effect was deep. That moment taught me something important. You don't need advanced English to express truth. You need courage and clarity. If you are learning English and worried it will limit your ability to love, remember this. Love is patient with imperfection. Language grows inside safety. When you feel safe, words come easier. When you force words, emotion retreats. Basically, love across changes doesn't demand fluency. It demands presence. And when you allow English to be part of that presence, not a barrier, both love and language grow stronger together. Marriage under pressure. Marriage doesn't usually break during dramatic moments. It cracks quietly, under small repeated pressures that feel harmless on their own. Moving to America showed me this in a way no advice book ever could. During those weeks of adjustment, marriage was no longer about romance or big promises. It became about endurance, communication, and learning how to stay connected when everything familiar disappeared. If you are practicing English listening, reading, and speaking through real stories, this is where language meets real emotional weight. Pressure arrived first through exhaustion. Climate changes, new routines, constant listening in English, constant explaining in English. By the end of the day, there was little energy left for careful words. And when energy drops, language simplifies. Simple language is honest, but it can also sound sharp. I'm tired. I can't deal with this now. Not today. These sentences are normal, yet under stress, they feel heavier than intended. Psychology explains this clearly. When stress hormones rise, the brain shifts into survival mode. Empathy decreases. Tone becomes flatter. This is not a personality change. It is a neurological response. Many couples misinterpret this as emotional distance. In reality, it is emotional overload. Understanding this saved us from unnecessary conflict. Instead of asking, "Why are you different?" we started asking, "How stressed are we right now?" Language played a surprising role here. In my native language, I could soften tension with humor or cultural shortcuts. In English, I had fewer tools. That made misunderstandings more likely. But it also forced clarity. American English values directness in difficult conversations. This is hard for me. I feel overwhelmed. I need support. These sentences feel blunt at first, but they prevent guessing. Research in relationship communication shows that direct emotional statements reduce long-term conflict. Ambiguity feels polite, but it creates confusion. Marriage under pressure also reveals different cultural expectations. In the US, partners often expect emotional self-regulation. You are encouraged to express feelings, but also to manage them. This balance can be confusing. Express too little, and you seem distant. Express too much, and you seem unstable. Learning this balance became part of my real English listening practice. I listened not just to words, but to how much was shared, and when. Small routines became anchors. Morning coffee, short walks, simple check-ins. How are you feeling today? Not a deep conversation, just a signal. Studies show that frequent, low-intensity emotional check-ins strengthen relationship stability more than rare, intense talks. These moments also created safe spaces to practice slow English speaking without pressure. There were moments of conflict, not loud ones. Quiet misunderstandings. A sentence said too quickly. A pause taken the wrong way. Silence that lasted too long. Silence is dangerous in marriage when it is misunderstood. But neuroscience offers an important insight. Silence after stress helps the brain reset. Talking too soon can escalate emotion. Once we reframed silence as recovery, not rejection, tension decreased. One night, after a difficult day, we sat quietly. No phones. No conversation. Just breathing. Later, I said in simple English, "I'm not pulling away. I'm just full." That sentence mattered. It named the experience without blame. Naming emotions reduces their intensity. This is proven in affect labeling research. When you put feelings into words, the brain calms down. Even simple words work. Marriage in a new country also brings identity shifts. Roles change. Confidence changes. The partner who once felt strong may feel lost. This imbalance can scare both people. But change is not loss. It is transition. Understanding this helped us avoid comparison with the past. Instead of asking, "Why aren't we like before?" we asked, "Who are we becoming now?" This mindset shift helped my English listening and speaking practice too. I stopped comparing my current English to my old self. Comparison creates shame. Shame blocks learning. Self-compassion opens it. Research consistently shows that learners who accept temporary regression progress faster than those who fight it. Marriage also taught me something about emotional vocabulary. You don't need many words to say something important. You need the right ones. I need patience. I need reassurance. I need rest. These sentences are simple, but they protect connection. They create boundaries without walls. If you are learning English and worried that stress will damage your relationships, remember this. Language limitations do not weaken love. Unspoken expectations do. When expectations are spoken, even in simple English, pressure decreases. Marriage under pressure is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something important is changing. Change requires renegotiation of roles, of communication, of patience. When you allow language to grow alongside that change, not ahead of it, both marriage and confidence survive. Basically, pressure doesn't destroy marriage. Silence without understanding does. And when you learn to speak slowly, honestly, and kindly, even in imperfect English, you turn pressure into growth. Family and belonging. belonging is a strange thing. You don't notice it until it disappears, and you don't understand it until you have to rebuild it from zero. During my weeks in America, family stopped being just people you live with and became the only familiar language when everything else felt foreign. If you are practicing English listening, reading, and speaking through real stories, family is where language slows down and meaning deepens. At first, I thought belonging would come from learning faster English. I believed that once my sentences flowed, I would feel at home. But the opposite happened. The more English I used outside, the more I needed silence and simplicity inside. Family became the place where English didn't need to perform. It just needed to work. Simple words. Clear feelings. No audience. This is important for real English learning. Many learners think progress happens only in public spaces. Work, school, conversations with strangers. But research in language acquisition shows that private, low-pressure communication builds fluency more sustainably. When you speak without fear of judgment, your brain relaxes. When your brain relaxes, learning accelerates. Family life in America also feels different. Independence is respected early. Children are encouraged to express opinions. Parents explain decisions instead of enforcing them silently. This creates a lot of talking. Not dramatic talking. Everyday talking. How was your day? What do you think? That makes sense. These phrases appear constantly. For English listening practice, this environment is gold. Repetition, emotional relevance, and real context all at once. But belonging is not automatic. Even inside a family, moving countries changes dynamics. Roles shift. Patience gets tested. Everyone carries stress differently. Some talk more. Some withdraw. Psychology explains this as stress coping styles. Neither is wrong. Problems arise when styles clash. Understanding this helped me listen better. Instead of reacting to silence, I listened for signals. Instead of filling every gap with words, I allowed space. I noticed how children adapt faster than adults. They absorb language like air. They don't worry about mistakes. They copy rhythm, not grammar. Watching this taught me a humbling lesson. Fluency grows from play, not pressure. This insight changed how I practiced slow English speaking at home. I stopped correcting myself mid-sentence. I finished thoughts first. Accuracy came later. Belonging also showed up in routines. Eating together. Watching the same shows. Walking the same streets. Familiarity creates safety. Neuroscience shows that predictable routines reduce stress hormones. When stress drops, cognitive resources free up. That means better listening, clearer speaking, stronger memory. Family routines quietly supported my English reading and speaking practice without me realizing it. There were moments of loneliness too. Being together doesn't erase missing other people, other places. Sometimes belonging feels split. Part of you here. Part of you somewhere else. This emotional split can interfere with language. You feel present physically but absent emotionally. When that happened, I used language to name it. I miss home. I feel divided. Naming emotions reduces their intensity. This is backed by affect labeling research. Even simple labels help the brain regulate. American culture treats belonging differently. You belong where you show up, not where you are from. This idea took time to sink in. Belonging is built through participation, not history. Attend the meeting. Join the activity. Be there again next week. This perspective reduced pressure. I didn't need to feel at home immediately. I just needed to return. That lesson applied directly to English learning. You don't need to feel fluent to belong in the language. You just need to keep showing up. Speak again tomorrow. Listen again today. Read a little more. Consistency beats intensity. Studies consistently show that short, daily exposure leads to better long-term retention than rare, intense study sessions. Family conversations became my safest training ground. I practiced asking questions. What do you mean? Can you explain? These questions are powerful tools in real English communication. They show interest, not weakness. They deepen connection. And they buy time for processing. There was a moment that clarified everything. Sitting together after a long day, someone said, "We'll make this work." The sentence was simple. The meaning was heavy. That's when I realized belonging is not a feeling you chase. It's a decision you repeat. Daily. Quietly. If you are learning English and feeling disconnected, look at where you feel safest. Start there. Language grows best in safety. Public confidence grows later. Belonging doesn't come from perfect pronunciation. It comes from shared moments. Basically, family teaches you that home is not a place you arrive at. It's something you build, sentence by sentence, day by day. And when English becomes part of that building process, it stops feeling foreign and starts feeling like yours. The choice that changed everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. The room was quiet, but my mind was loud. Every word from earlier kept replaying in my head. The truth I had just learned didn't feel dramatic. It felt heavy, real. And once you know the truth, you can't unknow it. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, asking myself one simple question. What do I do now? For weeks, I had felt something was off. The pauses, the half-answers, the way certain topics were avoided. But I never expected this. And yet, when the truth finally arrived, it didn't shock me. It clarified everything. Sometimes, clarity hurts more than confusion. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sunlight came through the window slowly, like it was unsure whether it should interrupt my thoughts. I made coffee, but didn't drink it right away. I just sat there holding the cup, letting the warmth remind me that I was still here. Still breathing. Still capable of choosing. Because that was the key thing now. I had a choice. Not everyone realizes this, but life-changing moments are often quiet. There is no music. No announcement. Just a decision waiting to be made. I could walk away. I could pretend none of this mattered. Or I could stay and face everything honestly. As I sat there, I realized something important. The problem wasn't the truth itself. The problem was fear. Fear of what would change if I accepted it. Fear of losing comfort. Fear of stepping into uncertainty. But growth never happens in comfort. Later that day, we met again. No arguments. No dramatic confrontations. Just two people sitting across from each other, finally speaking without masks. I need to know, I said calmly. Are you ready to be honest from now on? There was a pause. A long one. And then came the answer that would shape everything. Yes. No more hiding. That moment mattered more than any apology. Because honesty isn't about the past. It's about the future. We talked for hours. about expectations, about mistakes, about things we were both afraid to admit. Some of the conversation was uncomfortable. Some of it was painful. But none of it was fake. And for the first time in a long time, I felt grounded. Not happy. Not relieved. Just real. That night, I went for a walk alone. The city felt different when I wasn't running from my thoughts. People passed by, living their own lives, carrying their own stories. It reminded me that everyone is choosing something every day, whether they realize it or not. I thought about how easy it is to stay silent, to accept half-truths, to settle for good enough, because change feels risky. But silence has a cost. And I had already paid too much. By the time I got home, my decision was clear. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. I chose honesty. I chose growth. I chose to stop waiting for things to magically improve. This choice didn't solve everything overnight. Real life doesn't work that way. But it changed the direction of my story. And sometimes, direction matters more than speed. In the days that followed, things felt different. Conversations were clearer. Boundaries were respected. Not perfectly, but sincerely. And that sincerity made all the difference. I also noticed something else. When you choose yourself, you stop needing validation from others. You stop chasing reassurance. You become quieter, but stronger. That was new for me. And powerful. If you're listening to this story right now, maybe you're standing at a similar crossroads. Maybe you're avoiding a truth because it feels inconvenient, or scary, or disruptive. But here's something I learned the hard way. Avoiding the truth doesn't protect you. It delays you. The moment you choose honesty, especially with yourself, is the moment your life starts moving again. Not carrot faster, but forward. And that's what matters. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a better one. When silence finally broke. The days after my decision felt strangely quiet. Not the uncomfortable silence I used to fear, but a calm one. The kind that happens when your mind is no longer fighting itself. I still had questions. I still had doubts. But they no longer controlled me. Something inside had shifted. I woke up with less tension in my chest. I breathed deeper. I listened better. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't rehearsing conversations in my head before they happened. Because I had already said the hardest things. Silence, I realized, isn't always empty. Sometimes it's space. Space to think. Space to heal. Space to hear your own voice again. That afternoon, we met one more time. Not to revisit the past, but to understand the present. We agreed to talk openly, without defending ourselves, without interrupting, without trying to win. Just honesty. It wasn't easy. There were moments when words failed. Moments when emotions rose unexpectedly. Moments when it would have been easier to shut down again. But this time, we didn't. I never meant to hurt you, came the quiet confession. I know, I replied. But intention doesn't erase impact. That sentence changed everything. Because for the first time, responsibility entered the room. Not blame. Not excuses. Responsibility. And with it came understanding. We talked about patterns. About how silence had become a habit. About how avoiding conflict felt safer than facing it, but only in the short term. Avoidance, I learned, always collects interest. Eventually, the bill comes due. As the conversation ended, there was no dramatic resolution. No promises that everything would be perfect from now on. Just a mutual agreement to do better, to speak sooner, to listen longer, to stay present even when it felt uncomfortable. And honestly, that was enough. That evening, I reflected on how many times in life we wait for closure from other people. We wait for apologies, for explanations, for validation. But real closure doesn't come from others. It comes from clarity. And clarity comes when you stop lying to yourself. In the following weeks, I noticed subtle changes. I said no without guilt. I asked questions without fear. I stopped over-explaining my feelings, trusting that the right people would understand. And the wrong ones didn't need convincing. This didn't make me colder. It made me lighter. There's a strange freedom in realizing you don't need to be understood by everyone. You just need to be honest with yourself. One night, while walking home, I caught my reflection in a dark window. I looked different. Not because anything external had changed, but because I wasn't hiding anymore. And that's when it hit me. The biggest shift wasn't in the relationship. It was in me. I had spent so much time trying to keep things together that I forgot to check if they were actually right for me. I confused endurance with love, silence with peace, familiarity with safety. But comfort without honesty is just another form of fear. If you're listening to this story right now, maybe you recognize that feeling. Maybe you're staying quiet because you're afraid of what speaking up might cost you. But here's the truth no one tells you. Staying silent costs you too. It costs you clarity. It costs you confidence. And eventually, it costs you yourself. Choosing honesty doesn't guarantee things will work out the way you hope. But it guarantees something even more important. You won't abandon yourself. And that changes how you show up in every part of your life. This section of my story isn't about a perfect ending. It's about a real turning point. The moment when silence stopped protecting me and started limiting me. Breaking it wasn't loud. It was deliberate. And it was necessary. Because the strongest people aren't the ones who never struggle. They're the ones who stop pretending everything is fine. This wasn't the end. But it was the moment my voice finally came back. And once you find your voice, you never forget how to use it. The moment I chose myself. There was a strange calm after everything was said. Not the kind of calm that comes from relief, but the kind that comes from acceptance. I stopped waiting for the next message. I stopped replaying conversations. I stopped asking myself what I could have done differently. Because for the first time, I had done enough. That realization didn't arrive suddenly. It settled in slowly, like dust after a storm. Quiet. Unavoidable. Final. One morning, I woke up and noticed something small but important. My phone was still on the table. No notifications. No missed calls. And instead of feeling anxious, I felt steady. I made breakfast. I opened the window. I let the day begin without trying to control it. That's when I understood what choosing yourself really means. It doesn't mean walking away in anger. It doesn't mean blaming the other person. And it doesn't mean pretending you don't care. It means deciding that your peace matters too. Over the next few days, I focused on simple things. Work. Sleep. Long walks without music. Moments where my thoughts could wander without being interrupted. And in those quiet moments, clarity returned. I saw the relationship for what it truly was, not what I hoped it would become. I saw how much energy I had spent trying to keep things balanced, even when they were already tipping. Love, I realized, should not feel like constant self-negotiation. Yes, relationships require effort, but they should not require silence as payment. One evening, we spoke again, not to reopen wounds, but to acknowledge reality. There was respect in the conversation, gratitude, and an understanding that some connections are meaningful, even if they are not meant to last. We did the best we could, was said softly. And for once, that felt true. We didn't promise to stay the same. We didn't make plans for the future. We simply allowed things to end without resentment. That was new for me. Letting go without anger felt unfamiliar, but right. That night, I sat alone and thought about how often people stay because leaving feels like failure. How often we confuse endings with weakness. But endings are not failures. They are decisions. And sometimes, they are acts of self-respect. If you're listening to this story right now, maybe you're holding on to something that no longer fits. Maybe you're waiting for clarity, or for the other person to change, or for the situation to become easier. But here's what I learned. Clarity doesn't come from waiting. It comes from choosing. Choosing to stop explaining yourself to people who aren't listening. Choosing to trust your discomfort as information. Choosing to believe that peace is not something you earn. It's something you allow. After everything ended, I expected to feel empty. But I didn't. I felt open. Open to rest. Open to growth. Open to a version of myself that wasn't constantly adapting to survive. And slowly, confidence returned. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything. I started speaking more honestly in all areas of my life. I stopped saying it's fine when it wasn't. I stopped agreeing just to avoid tension. And surprisingly, the world didn't fall apart. It adjusted. People adjusted. And the ones who didn't? They faded naturally. That was okay too. Because choosing yourself changes your standards. And when your standards change, your life follows. This story isn't about heartbreak. It's about alignment. It's about realizing that love without honesty isn't love, it's endurance. And endurance is not a goal. Peace is. As this section comes to an end, I want you to remember something important. You are allowed to choose yourself without guilt. You are allowed to walk away without hatred. And you are allowed to start again without explanation. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stop fighting for something and start listening to yourself instead. That was the moment everything truly changed for me. Not when I spoke up, not when the silence broke, but when I finally chose myself. And once you do that, your story doesn't end. It finally begins.